In this course, you've built a solid foundation for developing automation and apps in Toka. In this exercise, we'll pull together everything that you've learnt to build a day-to-day website, grabbing data about the day from a variety of sources to display inside of an application. To start, what we'll do is create an automation project where we can piece together all of our activities that are going to scrape this data for us, and then we'll move on and create the app to display all of that data. To start, let's create a new project, and we'll call this Grab Daily Data and give it an appropriate description. So first, we'll create an activity that navigates to Moon Giant to get the current phases of the moon. So we'll add an activity, we'll call this Moon Phase, give it a description, so gets the phase of the moon today, and then assign it a bot. Close down any browser windows that we currently got open, and we'll start with a fresh activity. So to begin, let's add some actions to our designer. We'll update to pull them through, and we'll use an open browser action to go and extract the current phase of the moon. So we'll go to browser, open browser. The URL that we'll need is in the exercise description. So we'll copy that, paste it in here. We'll give this browser a descriptive alias, so we'll just call this moon phase. We'll say moon phase up here as well, and hit save. Running this through, the browser should open the moon phase. And we can see here that it's a waxing crescent with illumination of about 2%. So the two pieces of the data that we're asked to grab here are the image for the image of the moon, and then also the data about the illumination and also the current phase. So to get both of those pieces of data, we use a get web element action. So we'll go to browser, get web element. We'll select first the image. We can select that here. Call this moon image. And then we'll use another get web element action to grab that data from the surrounding box. So we'll click on here and grab the table cell. If we hit save and run both of these actions through, you'll see that the first action extracts that image, and the second action then grabs the text that surrounds it. Optionally, what I'd like to do here is actually remove this piece of text here that says today from this text. And to do that, I'll use a regex replace action, which you may have seen used in another video. So we'll search for our regex replace. The text that we'd like to replace on or remove is going to come from our get web element for the text. We can select that here. The expression that we'd like to remove is today and then the new line. And we won't replace it with anything, so it's removed from the text entirely. Hit save. Running this through, we'll see that we're left with just the text that we want. Finally, all we need to do is save both of these pieces of data to a data store. So we'll save our activity as it is, head back to our project, and add a data store in which to save that data. So we'll call this daily data, give it a description, and hit create. So that now we've got somewhere we can store our image and text. We'll go back to our activity, and we can use both of those get web elements to set a data store variable. So we'll select our data store. This we'll call moon image. Type is image, and the image that we'd like to use comes from this first get web element action. We'll hit save and do exactly the same thing for the text. So our daily data store, we'll call this moon phase, and the value just comes from the result of our regex replace action. Finally, after we've done all of this, we'd like to close down the browser. So we'll go to browser, close browser, giving it the alias. And now if we run this through as an entire piece, it should open the browser, extract the image and the text, save that data to the data store, and close the browser down. And you can see it does just that. Finally, to make this look a little bit neater, we'll package all of this actions up into a group. So we'll hit Ctrl-G or Command-G if you're on a Mac, and we'll call this Get Moon Phase. Lovely. Okay, so we're finished with our first activity. The next activity that we need to create, we'll go to daysoftheyear.com to extract a current celebration for the day of the month that we're on. So let's head back to our automation project and add a new activity to do that. We'll call this Get Celebration. Description, gets today's celebration, and the bot we can assign here as well. So this will look very similar to the last activity. We'll open the browser, extract some data, and then save that data to our data store. So let's go browser, open browser, I'll paste in the URL that we need. Here what we need to do is actually provide the first bit of the URL, which is going to remain fixed every time that we run this automation. But hereafter, we actually need to write in the month and also the day. So to get both of these pieces of information, we'll need to use a datetime action, which you may not have seen yet. So for now, we'll save this as Get Celebration, and we'll use a datetime action to get the current abbreviated date and day of the month. So if we do datetime and hit save, and I'll drag this above our open browser, you see that running this through, we get the abbreviated month, which is exactly what we want, and also the day of the month. Let's data check both of these and use them inside of this URL. So we'll edit our open browser, select the end of our string here, data chip, firstly grab the abbreviated month, add our slash, and then add the day of the month that we're currently on, which today happens to be the 27th. So we'll save this, and now running both of these through, you'll see that the browser navigates to the correct day of the month. We need to get rid of this little cookies notification, so we'll use an image click to do this. So we'll go Vision, Image Click, and select that Accept button. And saving and running this, you'll see it gets rid of the cookies notification. Next, all we need to do is grab that piece of data using our Get Web element. So we'll scroll down in our page in interactive view, and this is the piece of text that we want to extract. So we'll go Browser, Get Web element, we'll select National Ice Cream Cake Day, which is the celebration today, and get the heading out of that so that we just extract the text. Hit save, and running this through, we'll see that indeed it extracts the current celebration for today's date. Next, we'll close the browser and save this data to our data store. So we'll go Browser, close browser, and finally we'll use a set data store variable to save that data to our data store. So we'll call this celebration. It's of type string because it's just a piece of text, and the value will just be whatever text we extract using our Get Web element action. Lovely. We'll package all of this up into a group for cleanliness as well. So we'll say Get Celebration Today, and saving and running this activity through. Again, we should see that it constructs the appropriate URL using the datetime action, gets rid of the cookies notification, grabs that data, and then closes the browser and saves it to the data store. Looking at our data store now, we can see that we've got the celebration, the image of the moon, and the current phase of the moon. And this is all data that we can now use inside of our app. We're required to create two further activities here, one to grab FTSE data for the current stock price, and another to grab the current world population from Worldometers, but we'll skip through these, as in comparison to these other two activities, they're relatively simple. Once we've completed these activities, we can then check our data store and see that all of the data that we've grabbed from each of those pages has successfully saved. The next thing that we'll need to do is chain these together into a workflow. So we'll go back to our project overview and add a new workflow. We'll call this Get Today's Data, give it a description, and hit Create. From here, we can simply drag a start node into our workflow to start, a stop node to finish, and then each of the activities that we'd like to run. Let's link these up. And now we can run this action or this workflow to check that it works correctly. Let's hit execute, and we can now see a preview of the bot as it runs through each of these activities in turn. Brilliant, our workflow completes. Just to do a sanity check, we can now check our pipeline and see that each of the activities indeed ran successfully. The final thing that we need to do inside of our automation project is just schedule this workflow so that it runs on a daily basis. So we'll go back to our overview, add a new schedule, and select the day's data workflow. We want this to run on a daily basis. We won't set an end date, and we want the time that this runs to be 1 in the morning. So we can set that here, hit save, and now this workflow should run every morning at 1 o'clock. Brilliant. We now need to create an app so that users can actually see this data. So let's go back to our projects page and create a new app project. We'll call this the day today and set restricted access so that only users that are logged in are able to see the data. We'll generate a secret, and you can see here that it's prompting me for a data store to store my user data in. Traditionally, you may create a separate data store for your user data, but for ease, I'll simply use the daily data store that I created before. We'll create a users table and give it columns for username and password, and we'll also require that users have to be approved once registered and provide the app with a default login page. Next, we just need to allocate that database to our project so that we can actually read that data. So we'll select the project that we want, and within that project, the daily data store. We want administrators and authenticated users to be able to read from this data store. We don't need any schemas, we don't need a favicon, so we can create our app. You can see by default it's added this one user, so we'll immediately approve them, and we'll add a column for the groups in the users table. Now we can start populating our app and pushing the content that we grabbed from our automation onto our pages. Let's start on the home page. The first thing that we'll do here is create our own custom navbar to move between the home and login pages. Instead of using the traditional navbar component to do this, we'll work by creating our own custom navbar using flex layouts and a variety of other components, giving us full customizability. Let's drag in a flex layout, and we'll set the content flow to row. We can set the background colour for this flex layout to match our theming, and for my theme I'd like to set this to a nice bright pink. So I can drag that through and set the colour of the background like so. Next I'll give this flex a little bit of padding so that the content inside is spaced away from the boundary of the page. And now, knowing that I'd like an icon and title on the left, and the buttons to link me through to my various pages on the right, I'll add another 2 flex layouts to this one. One of them will be forced towards the left over here, and one towards the right. So let's drag another flex layout in. We'll set the content flow in here to row, and we'll add some spacing between the elements. We can then set the width of this layout, say to 50% of the page width, and duplicate this so that now we've got 2 halves to our navbar, a left half and a right half. Let's add the icon and the title. To add the icon, we'll use the icon component, and we'll search for something that indicates the fact that this is a daily app. This is grabbing information from all over the globe. So we'll search for a globe. This looks good. And we'll add this to our page. We can set the size slightly larger and also modify the colour so it's offset against the pink background. Let's add a title for our app. So we'll call this The Day Today. Again, we'll set the font colour to white so it really pops against that background, and also increase it so it's really readable. This looks really good. Next, we need to add a couple of link buttons to take us through to our home and login pages. So we'll grab a link button from above like so and place it into our rightmost flex layout. We'll relabel this to home and make sure it directs to the home page. We'll set the style of the button to be outlined and also the colour to be secondary so it pops against the background of our app. We'll change the typography here so that it's white and also capitalise the text. We can then duplicate this button to do the same for our login page. We'll also set this login page to open in a modal. I'm also going to square the corners of this link button. I'll do the same over here. Finally, inside of this flex layout, I'll position these elements to the right hand side of the screen, like so. And now previewing this, I can see my navbar with a title icon on the left and my link buttons to take me through to different pages on the right. Now let's actually populate the content of this page. To start, I'd like to pull in my population and FTSE data. So I'll drag another flex layout underneath this one and give this a bit of padding so the elements are slightly spaced out from the edges of the page. We'll set the content flow here to row, as I'd like to stage these elements side by side, and we'll add another flex layout outside of this one for our content. Let's set the width of this to be, say, 50% of the width of the page. And now we can actually add the text components to display the data we grabbed from the back end. So let's add some text in here. We'll say population today is. We'll then add a divider under this. And finally, we'll add another piece of text to actually pull through the population from the data store. So let's go variable, data store is daily data, and we can select our population piece from there. We'll also make this slightly bigger so that we can read it very easily. We'll center this, as well as the text above, and change the colour on our divider. Let's say to our secondary colour. We can also set the width of this. So let's set the width to fluid, pull this down, and make sure that our flex layout is aligned centrally. That looks really good. So let's grab exactly this piece and duplicate it and do the same for the FTSE data. So we can just modify this text. And then instead of using this data chip, we can go to our data store and pull through our FTSE price. We can add a pence after this to make it clear exactly what units this is being measured in, and just drag our text back above our divider like so. That looks really good. Next, let's add some flexes to display the moon phase and also the celebration of the day. So we'll go over here to our layouts and add another flex underneath this. Again, we'll give this a bit of padding and make sure that it's consistent with the flex above. So I've got a padding of 6 here. We're going to do the same down here. Let's add an image component so that we can display that moon image that we grabbed using our automation. And let's grab that from our data store. Set the size of this so it doesn't fill the entirety of the page. And we can also modify the border to get rid of the corners from our image by setting the corners radius here to 4. We'll drag now some text into our page so that we can display the moon phase data. And again, we'll data chip this from the data store. We'll step up into our flex and set the content here to flow in a row, as well as to align centrally. Give everything inside a little bit more spacing. And then we can pull a divider into our page as well to separate these two elements out. So we'll set the orientation to vertical. Change the colour on this. So let's set this to our secondary colour. And finally, we'll bring everything so it's in the centre of the page. Next, we'll add a flex layout for our celebration of the day. So let's find our flex. Again, we'll set some padding on this. And now we can enter our celebration of the day. So let's add some text components to pull this data through. We'll modify the size of all of this text so it's a little bit larger. So did you know that today is? And then we'll pull through our celebration of the day. Let's make this slightly larger. And we'll also set the flow in our flex so this flows from left to right across the page and the content is aligned like so. Play around with the alignment and the spacing, and this looks really good. Let's save and preview our page, and I might just modify the spacing between the image and the text here. It's not so large. You can also play with this so that this flows in a column instead of in a row. So you can modify your page as you go. We were also asked in our exercise description to add a footer to this page. So we'll add in another flex layout, bottom of our page. So let's use the Explorer to help us do that. Collapse all of these and add another flex layout to our page. For this, we'll add some generic lorem ipsum to our footer. So let's drag in some text. Again, we'll pad this out slightly from the edges of the page. And we can set the background of this flex so that it matches our theming. Now when we preview this app, we can see that our footer is successfully in the page. The last thing we need to do is create a block from this footer. So I'll select this flex layout, create a new block, and we'll call this footer. And it can now be reused across our app. Finally, we need to modify this for a mobile view so it looks good on a mobile phone. So we'll edit this app, and we'll move into a mobile viewport. You can see that it looks roughly correct, but there are a few things that we need to tweak. So the first one that we'll do is bring the text here centrally. The next thing that we'll do is set the content inside of this flex layout so that it flows down the page instead of across the page. So we can just do that by selecting column. We then also increase the spacing between the items slightly and select each of these and set them to full width, so they span the entire width of the mobile screen. This text looks a little bit cramped as well, so we'll just reduce the spacing between here, so this looks much better. And finally, we need to modify this navbar at the top so that this flows nicely as well. So we'll set the content flow in this navbar to column to bring these two elements below each other. Again, we'll set this to span the entire width of the page, and we'll center the content. And we'll do exactly the same with this flex layout here, letting it span the entire width of the page and aligning the content centrally. We can also give this a little bit of margin at the top so it's spaced away from the title slightly. And now we've modified our page to work in mobile. Before we clock off, let's just check on our login page and see how that looks. So we'll add our login page. You can see that this card is picking up the background color, but we'll just set this to white. And now our app is complete.